So I was wondering when the cycle for Chabad, they have this cycle where they do Rambam, either 3 chapters a day and they finish in 1 year, or 1 chapter a day and they finish in 3 years. And as it turns out, both cycles came to a completion. It's such an auspicious time right now, and I learned about it in a really unwitting way. Like, I didn't think about it. Like, something came up on my feed, and Rabbi, I think his name is Zusha Zilberstein or something, a Chabad rabbi, and he announced that they finished on Tu B'Shvat, which was yesterday. They finished both cycles. It matched up. So I remember they're always on different cycles, and then somehow it matched up this year, according to him. That's what I heard. At least the way I understood it. So if I didn't hear it correctly, then forgive my mistake. But basically, that's what I heard him say. So I thought, maybe I'll get started with the Rambam's, with the Chabad cycle. I'll do it with the 1 chapter, for now. Okay, so here it is. In the name of God, Lord of the world, the Rambam starts, B'Shem Hashem El Olam. Okay. Oz lo evosh habiti el kol mitzvotecha. Oz lo evosh habiti el kol mitzvotecha. Then I will not be ashamed when I gaze at all of your mitzvot. Psalms 119:6. The mitzvot given to Moses at Mount Sinai. This is the Rambam, Maimonides, okay. The mitzvot given to Moses at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations, okay, as implied by Exodus 24:12. And I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah and the mitzvah. The Torah refers to the written law, the mitzvah to its explanation. God commanded us to fulfill the Torah according to the instruction of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is called the oral law. Okay. Moses, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died. He gave a Torah scroll to each tribe and placed another scroll in the ark as a testimonial. As Deuteronomy 31:26 states, take this Torah scroll and place it beside the ark, and it will be there as a testimonial. The mitzvah, meaning the explanation of the Torah, he did not transcribe. Instead, he commanded it verbally to the elders, to Joshua, and to the totality of Israel, as Deuteronomy 13:1 states, be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you. For this reason it is called the oral law. Even though the oral law was not transcribed, Moses, our teacher, taught it in its entirety in his court to the 70 elders. Eleazar, Pinchas, and Joshua received the tradition from Moses. In particular, Moses transmitted the oral law to Joshua, who was his primary disciple, and instructed him regarding it. Similarly, throughout his life, Joshua taught the oral law. Many elders received the tradition from him. Eli received the tradition from the elders and from Pinchas. Shmuel received the tradition from Eli in his court. David received the tradition from Shmuel in his court. Achia Hashiloni. Achia of Shiloh was one of those who experienced the exodus from Egypt. He was a Levite and heard teachings from Moses. He was, however, of low stature Moses' age. Afterwards, he received the tradition from David in his court. Elijah received the tradition from Achia of Shiloh in his court. Elisha received the tradition from Elijah in his court. Yehoiada, the priest, received the tradition from Elisha in his court. Zechariah received the tradition from Yehoiada in his court. Hosea received the tradition from Zechariah in his court. Amos received the tradition from Hosea in his court. Isaiah received the tradition from Amos in his court. Micah received the tradition from Isaiah in his court. Yoel received the tradition from Micah in his court. Nachum receives the tradition from Yoel in his court. Habakkuk receives the tradition from Nachum in his court. Zephaniah receives the tradition from Habakkuk in his court. Jeremiah received the tradition from Zephaniah in his court. Baruch ben Uriah received the tradition from Jeremiah in his court. Ezra in his court received the tradition from Baruch and his court. The members of Ezra's court are referred to as Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly. They included Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, Nehemiah ben Chachaliah, Mordechai, the linguist, Bilshan, calls him Mordechai the linguist, Zerubbabel, and many other sages, 120 elders in all. The last surviving member of this group was Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the Just. He was included among the 120 elders and received the oral law from all of them. He served as the high priest after Ezra. Antigonus of Socho in his court received tradition from Shimon the Just. In his court, Yossi ben Yoezer of Zreida and Yosef ben Yochanan of Jerusalem, in their court, received the tradition from Antigonus and his court. Yehoshua ben Prachia and Nitai of Arbel, in their court, received the tradition from Yossi ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Prachia in their court. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach, in their court, received the tradition from Yehoshua ben Prachia and Nitai of Arbel. In their court, Shemaiah and Avtalion were righteous converts, and their court received the tradition from Yehuda and Shimon in their court. Hillel and Shammai in their court received the tradition from Shemaiah and Avtalion. In their court, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Hillel the elder, received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai and their courts. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students who were great sages and received the tradition from him. They were Rabbi Elazar the Great, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Yossi the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef received from Rabbi Eliezer the Great. Yosef, his father, was a righteous convert. Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Meir, a son of righteous converts, received the tradition from Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Meir and his colleagues also received the tradition from Rabbi Ishmael. The colleagues of Rabbi Meir include Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, Rabbi Yochanan the shoemaker, Yochanan Sandler, Shimon ben Azai, and Rabbi Hanani ben Trajan. Similarly, Rabbi Akiva's colleagues also received the tradition from Rabbi Elazar the Great. Rabbi Akiva's colleagues include Rabbi Tarfon, the teacher of Rabbi Yossi of the Galil, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabban Gamliel the elder received the tradition from Rabban Shimon, his father, the son of Hillel the elder. Rabban Shimon, his son, received the tradition from him. Rabban Gamliel, his son, received the tradition from him. And Rabban Shimon, his son, received the tradition from him. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabban Shimon, and referred to as Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our saintly teacher, received the tradition from his father, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, and from Rabban Shimon and his colleagues. Rabbeinu HaKadosh composed the Mishneh. From the days of Moses, our teacher, until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, no one had composed a text for the purpose of teaching the oral law in public. Instead, each generation, the head of the court, or the prophet of that generation, would take notes of the teachings which he received from his masters for himself and teach them verbally in public. Similarly, according to his own potential, each individual would write notes for himself of what he heard, regarding the explanation of Torah, its laws, and the new concepts that were deduced in each generation concerning laws that were not communicated by the oral tradition, rather deduced using one of the 13 principles of biblical exegesis and accepted by the High Court. The situation continued until the age of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He collected all the teachings, all the laws, and all the explanations and commentaries that were heard from Moses, our teacher, and which were taught by the courts in each generation concerning the entire Torah. From all these he composed the text of the Mishneh. He taught it to the sages in public and revealed it to the Jewish people, who all wrote it down. They spread it in all places so that the oral law would not be forgotten by the Jewish people. Why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh make such an innovation instead of perpetuating the status quo? Because he saw the students becoming fewer, new difficulties constantly rising, the Roman Empire spreading itself throughout the world and becoming more powerful, and the Jewish people wandering and becoming dispersed to the far ends of the world. Therefore, he composed a single text that would be available to everyone so that it could be studied quickly and would not be forgotten. Throughout his entire life, he and his court taught the Mishneh to the masses. These are the great sages who are part of the court of Rabbeinu HaKadosh and who received the tradition from him. His sons Shimon and Gamliel, Rabbi Ephes, Rabbi Chanina ben Chama, Rabbi Chia, Rav Yanai, Bar Kapara, Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Hoshaya. Thousands and myriads of other sages received the tradition from Rabbeinu Kadosh together with these great sages. Even though all of the 11 sages mentioned above received the tradition from Rabbeinu Kadosh and attended his study sessions, there are differences between them. At that time, Rabbi Yochanan was of lesser stature. Afterwards, he became a disciple of Rabbi Yanai and received instruction from him. Similarly, Rav received the tradition from Yanai, and Shmuel received the tradition from Chanina ben Chama. Rav composed the Sofer and the Sifri to explain the sources for the Mishneh. Rabbi Chia composed the Tosefta to explain the subjects discussed in the Mishneh. Rabbi Hoshaya and Bar Kapara composed Brises to explain the matters discussed in the Mishneh. Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud in Eretz Yisrael approximately 300 years after the destruction of the temple. Among the great sages who received the tradition from Rav and Shmuel were Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, Rav Nachman, and Rav Kahana. Among the great sages who received the tradition from Rabbi Yochanan were Rabba, Bar Chana, Rav Ami, Rav Asi, Rav Dimi, Rav Avid. Among the sages who received the tradition from Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda were Rabba and Rav Yosef. Among the sages who received the tradition from Rabba and Rav Yosef were Abaya and Rava. Both of them also received the tradition from Rav Nachman. Among the sages who received the tradition from Rava were Rav Ashi and Ravina. Mar bar Rav Ashi received the tradition from Rav Ashi, his father, and from Ravina. Thus, there were 40 generations from Rav Ashi back to Moses, our teacher, of blessed memory. They were: Rav Ashi received the tradition from Rava. Rava received the tradition from Rabba. Rabba received the tradition from Rav Huna. Rav Huna received the tradition from Rabbi Yochanan, Rav and Shmuel. Rav Yochanan, Rav and Shmuel received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we should do, let's count it again, because I'll tell you that 40 is a massive number in the Peel 89 Gematriatic Quantum Thought Calendar that is meant to help be catalytic in some way, in a way that's beyond my knowledge. It's a mathematical catalyst to the ultimate redemption, the Geula Shlema, and the welcoming in of Melech HaMashiach, the King Messiah. And so, when I see 40 numbers in the Rambam, I have to connect it with the Pil 89. Because after all, the Rambam would say this principle, I think it's the 12th principle, that Ani Mamin Ben Muna Shlema B'Vias HaMashiach Ya'achal B'Yishis B'Me'ayim Kol Ze'achal Kilo B'Choyer Shavu. Okay, here we are. 1. Rav Ashi received the tradition from Rava. Okay, there were 40 generations from Rav Ashi back to Moses, our teacher, of blessed memory. They were 1. Rav Ashi received the tradition from Rava. 2. Rava received the tradition from Rabba. 3. Rabba received the tradition from Rav Huna. 4. Rav Huna received the tradition from Rav Yochanan, Rav and Shmuel. 5. Rav Yochanan and Rav and Shmuel received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKadosh. 6. Rabbeinu HaKadosh received the tradition from Rabbi Shimon, his father. 7. Rabbi Shimon received the tradition from Rabban Gamliel, his father. 8. Rabban Gamliel received the tradition from Rabban Shimon, his father. 9. Rabban Shimon received the tradition from Rabban Gamliel, the elder, his father. 10. Rabban Gamliel, the elder, received the tradition from Rabban Shimon, his father. 11. Rabban Shimon received the tradition from Hillel, his father, and Shammai. Rabban Shimon received the tradition from Hillel, his father, and Shammai. Okay. 12. Hillel and Shammai received the tradition from Shammai of Talion. 13. Shammai of Talion received the tradition from Yehuda and Shimon ben Shetach. 14. Yehuda and Shimon received the tradition from Yehoshua ben Prachia and Nitai Ha'arbeli. Okay. 15. Yehoshua and Nitai of Arbel. Okay. Yehoshua and Nitai received the tradition from Yossi ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan. Okay. 16. Yossi ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan received the tradition from Antignos. 17. Antignos received the tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. 18. Simon the Just. 18. Shimon the Just received the tradition from Ezra. 19. Ezra received the tradition from Baruch. 20. Baruch received the tradition from Jeremiah. 21. Jeremiah received the tradition from Zephaniah. 22. Zephaniah received the tradition from Habakkuk. 23. Habakkuk received the tradition from Nahum. 24. Nahum received the tradition from Yoel. 25. Yoel received the tradition from Micah. 26. Micah received the tradition from Isaiah. 27. Isaiah received the tradition from Amos. 28. Amos received the tradition from Hosea, or Hosea in English. 29. Hosea received the tradition from Zechariah, or Zechariah. 30. Zechariah received the tradition from Jehoiada. 31. Jehoiada received the tradition from Elisha. 32. Elisha received the tradition from Elijah. 33. Elijah received the tradition from Achia the Shilonite. 34. Achia received the tradition from David. 35. David received the tradition from Shmuel. 36. Shmuel received the tradition from Eli. 37. Eli received the tradition from Pinchas. 38. Pinchas received the tradition from Joshua. 39. Joshua received the tradition from Moses, our teacher. And 40, and which takes us to complete the Pil 89 Messianic Gematriatic Quantum Thought Calendar. Moses, our teacher, received the tradition from the Almighty. And this is the introduction to the Mishneh Torah by the Rambam, Maimonides, and that's it for today.